Hello, good evening, friends. This is a video on conceptualization of gender and empowerment. Today, I would like to give a brief description on the conceptualization of gender and empowerment. Gender equality in political participation and decision-making process is a fundamental aspect of modern democratic governance. The concepts of good governance depends on certain rules such as equality, effective participation, strong legal structure, and contribution of both men and women in different development activities and incorporates gender into it. India, the largest democracy and the second largest populated country in the world, became a member of the United Nations since its inception. Article 2 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which forms the basis of Bill of Rights of many national constitutions, including India, declares that everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration, without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national and social origin, property, birth or other status. Fair representation of women in political affairs is both desirable and important, as it signifies credibility and legitimacy of democratic governance. Gender balance in democratic decision-making process is an act of essential component because women are harbinger of new ideas, insights, and perspectives to the political process that enriches the focus and content of discourse in politics and makes governments more responsive to the needs and aspirations of people, and especially of unprivileged people, including women. But gender imbalance is a common phenomenon in almost every society, barring a few in Nordic countries. The pace of women's participation in the political decision-making bodies is so low globally, and particularly in India, that the Equal Opportunities Commission in the UK had to declare that at the current rate of progress, it will take 200 years before the Westminster Parliament has equal representation of men and women. Hence, the issue of gender empowerment through effective participation in political decision-making bodies and other related activities has become a global concern. However, before discussing the issue of gender empowerment, let us first understand what is meant by the term gender, and then focus will be shifted to empowerment and its different dimensions. Let us first begin with the etymology of gender. Etymology of gender. The concept of gender has now become an issue of extensive study by feminists, development theorists, and others across the globe. Though the concept has assumed an important position by various agencies and institutions of the United Nations, as well as national governments, since the middle of the last century, it has only become a buzzword in the social science, biological science, and medical science in the 60s of the 20th century. However, the term gender gradually occupied an important position in the academic discourse as well as development agenda from the 80s of the last century. Since then, it has attracted the attention of the global leaders, social scientists, feminist writers, and activists. The concept was first popularized globally at the dawn of the new millennium, when the world leaders set 8 Development Goals (MDGs), out of which number 3 was to promote gender equality and empower women, which they targeted and promised to achieve by the end of 2015. All the member countries reaffirmed their faith in the United Nations organizations and its charter, and further resolved to promote gender equality and the empowerment of women as effective ways to combat poverty, hunger, and disease, and to stimulate development that is truly sustainable. However, the term gender has a quite complex etymology. The origin of the term gender can be traced to the Middle English gender, a loanword from Norman Conquest era Old French, which in modern term is genre. The earliest meanings of the word were kind, short, genus, and type or class, style, etc., which has a sense of Latin genus. It is related to the Greek root gen, meaning to produce. Since the 14th century, the word gender has been using as a grammatical term referring to classes of noun designed as masculine, feminine, common, or neuter in some languages. But the term did not become common until the mid-20th century. Although the words gender and sex both have the sense of the state of being male or female, they are often used interchangeably, though sex tends to refer to biological differences, while gender refers to cultural or social ones, and gender is no way inherently and solely connected to one's physical anatomy. The concept of gender is the range of characteristics pertaining to and differentiating between masculinity and femininity. On the basis of the context, however, these characteristics may include biological sex, that is the state of being male, female, intersex, or transgender. Some cultures have specific gender-related social roles that can be considered distinct from male and female, such as the hijra or eunuch, mainly found in India and Pakistan. John Money, the renowned sexologist, for the first time in 1955, introduced the terminological distinction between biological sex and gender as a role. Prior to his work, the term was used merely to refer to grammatical categories. But the meaning of the word gender, introduced by John Money, did not receive widespread popularity from its very first use. The word gender became popular only when the feminist writers embraced the concept with a distinction between biological sex and social construct of gender. Since the 70s of the 20th century, the social scientists have begun to use the term gender strictly in social sciences and English literature only. In the English literature, the trichotomy between biological sex, psychological gender, and social gender role first appeared in a feminist paper on transsexualism in 1978. This change in meaning of gender can be traced to the 1980s, and a small acceleration of the process in the scientific literature was observed in 1993 when the Food and Drug Administration of the United States of America started to use gender instead of sex. In 2001, the FDA reversed its position and began using sex again as the biological classification and gender as a person's self-representation as male or female, or how that person is responded to by social institutions based on the individual's gender presentation. Since then, In gender studies, the term gender refers to proposed social and cultural constructions of masculinities and femininities. In this context, gender explicitly excludes reference to biological differences, and it only focuses on cultural differences, which was propounded by various psychoanalysts like Julia Kristeva, Lucy Irigaray, and American feminist Judith Butler, replacing the term women with gender. In South America and Asia, including India, the process of replacement of the word women with gender began in the academic discourse by the influence of the US and French scholars. First, the Brazilian scholars, influenced by US and French debates, started to replace the term women with the term gender, which they termed as a socially constructed category created through power relations between the sexes, therefore not determined by biological differences between men and women. Since last 4 decades or a little more, the deconstruction process from women to gender has further been popularized with feminist writers and activists. The change in women's position in the northwestern countries since the 1970s, including women's greater participation in education and labor market, opportunities to control over reproductivity through contraception and abortion, changes in the possibilities for and attitudes towards divorce and cohabitation mean that women, and especially young women who had grown up in the 1980s, increasingly think of equality between women and men as something that has been achieved. However, this change of notion of choice has consistently been replayed in the debates around gender. Gabriel Griffin feels that the roots of the replacement of women with gender, however, that connected to the equal opportunities policies, which has led to the equality discourses proclaiming the end for the need for feminism, were much more problematic. It was through those roots that popular culture forms, showing women as on a particular kind of par with men, equally violent, equally sexually voracious, equally ruthless, as epitomized by the female stalker movie Fatal Attraction, or indeed by Sex and the City became popularized. When this kind of changes of notion is happening globally, India could not but respond to such stimulating actions. In the 1990s, the women's study centers grew out in India as a result of such changes of attitude towards feminism and women's participation in the people's movements that emerged in the 1960s and 1970s across the world. The SNDT Women's University pioneered the entry of women's studies into the Indian university system. The university, established in 1916, aimed at the establishment of gender equality through education. At present, the University Grants Commission has affiliated gender study centers in almost every state in India. Besides, the Government of India formulated a national policy for empowerment of women and set up a national research center for women in the interest of women. I would like to conclude here. In the next video, I will try to throw more light on the concept of gender and empowerment of women. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.